report, outcome of this meeting. Yeah, so those are the ground rules. Allow me again, first of all, introduce myself, then I deliver my welcoming remarks. I'm John Bosco Kalisa. I'm the CEO of East African Business Council. Indeed, we are very grateful to organize this webinar with support from our donor, our funder, Trademark East Africa, and the EAC Secretariat, with the title on looking at the performance of the Northern and Central Corridor trade routes. What are the opportunities and the challenges for the private sector competitiveness? First of all, again, as I said, allow me to introduce the key panelists. If you have sufficient bandwidth, you could put on your video camera. Let me start off with Dr. Marian Cebunya, the Chairperson, National Logistics Platform, Republic of Uganda. Doctor, can you wave off the participants? Just a minute to put on your video, Doctor.
I regret I'm not in a position to do that. You could put on my picture.
Okay, that's great. That's great. I will put your picture there. Then Mr. John Mathenge, the Managing Director via Service. John. We have Mr. Agayo Ogambi. Ogayo Ogambi, the head policy and advocacy Shippers Council of East Africa. We also have Emmanuel. Very good. We also have Manuel Imanzi, the Director of Transport Policy Program, Northern Corridor Transit Transport Coordination Authority. We can see you.
Good morning, sir, and good morning, everyone.
Yeah, you are most welcome, Emmanuel.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
We have Engineer Merichel, Director of Logistics Department, Central Corridor Transport Facilitation Agency. Engineer, are you on the call?
Yes, I am. Good morning, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, you are most welcome, Engineer. Barana and Iki, you are most welcome. I will be joined by the representative from the Secretary General office. Of course, on this call we do have our development partners. We have Trademark East Africa. We have JZ, USID. They are all on call, and I want to appreciate them for the support. So, since we have the panelists on the call, allow me quickly to deliver my opening remarks, and I appreciate our panelists for making time to join us and share your insight, experience, and the opportunities that are provided by our corridors. So again, let me start off by conveying to you the greetings from the EABC board, and I welcome you to this important webinar. The webinar that is looking at the efficiency and the costs of freight and transport services in boosting competitiveness of international trade, and by the extension of the economic performance of our countries. You all know that transport and logistics providers have been enlisted as an essential service provider during the imposition of COVID-19 containment measures. Therefore, we underscore the importance of transport and logistics in the regional economy. In addition, the main agenda of economic growth and competitiveness of global and regional economies is improving freight logistics performance. Improving trade routes, corridors through enhancing trade facilitation measures have continued to be important to EAC regional integration agenda. So the effect of COVID to transport and logistics globally has been very devastating. The container throughput index, which measures the number of people and goods that pass through the shipping ports on daily basis declined by almost 9.5%. In addition, the International Air Travel Association, IATA, stated that the industry-wide air cargo tonnage per kilometer fell by 15.3%. That is on a yearly basis in the 3 months. That is from March to June 2020. Explaining further, cargo volumes were set back and due to lack of capacity and due to the imposition of a number of the COVID-related measures. So looking at the effect of COVID to the EAC transport and logistics performance, the COVID pandemic did not spare our very own ports. So regarding cargo throughput at the port of Mombasa, the Mombasa port, the total capacity that was registered by then was around 34.13 million tons of cargo, which were handled in 2020, which was less by 1.2 million tons due to COVID. Regarding the port of Dar es Salaam, there was also a decline in terms of the cargo by 1.0%. I wanted to highlight how the COVID had a devastating impact in terms of our port performance, in terms of cargo throughput and in terms of the time and the clearance. I know the experts here from both Northern and Central Corridor will provide the details and what has been done. So on our side, as EABC, we've been looking at what is the effect of transport and logistics and our economy and our competitiveness. Again, we want to record and appreciate the efforts made by our governments, ministries of transport, Ministry of Trade, for coming up with appropriate measures in terms of containing the spread, as well as allowing the essential goods to continue to flow. Of course, there were some delays, but overall, when we looked at the number of the reports, including the recent report produced by East African Shippers Council, the decline was not so significant as expected. So we've been also looking at the indicators, some of the potential indicators in terms of time, costs, and reliability. Despite that, we didn't continue to perform as expected during the COVID, but we see some kind of improvement, and I wanted to commend the efforts done by corridor authorities, both Northern Corridor and Central Corridor, that they have maintained the level of infrastructure, they have maintained in terms of improving their handling capacity. Of course, there are still challenges, but again, you see some good level of improvement. So we from the EABC, again, this is our call that we need to continue to improve the transport and logistics efficiency, because these have a negative spillover effects in terms of price, in terms of trade competitiveness. So our role is to see how do we bring corridors, how do we ensure that we keep this momentum and build back better, build our resilience and build and ensure that some of the emerging NTBs and others are addressed through our corridor performance. Again, as we move towards CFTA, we envisage and we see that the corridor will play a cardinal role in terms of market access conditions, in terms of enhancing our regional value chain and competitiveness. So with that background in mind and the insight, I have again eminent panelists with us. I will start off with Emmanuel. Emmanuel from Northern Corridor, to give us the insight how the corridor has been performing. I know they have a number of instruments they are put in place to ensure that they improve in terms of clearance, they improve in terms of infrastructure and trade facilitation. Also, recently, the Northern Corridor has introduced, they are able to monitor some of the regional value chain. And I want again to appreciate them that now the corridor are not only looked at as transport and transport routes, but they are looking at what we call spillover effects. How do corridors support the growth of regional and continental value chain? So with those few opening remarks, allow me to invite Emmanuel to share the insights of what they have been doing. And after that, I will ask him some questions, again related to the Northern Corridor. Over to you, Emmanuel.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir, and the moderator for this session. First of all, let me appreciate the initiative by the East African Business Council of organizing this platform, which I think is actually a way of us corridor to share some of the interventions and things that we are doing to make sure that our corridor remains competitive. First of all, my name is Emmanuel, like the moderator has mentioned, Imani Ranzi, and I am the Director Transport Policy and Planning. So I'm actually standing in on behalf of my Executive Secretary, Mr. Nyarandi Omai, who has not been able to make this call because of previous commitment. Moderator, if you allow, I will briefly talk about the Northern Corridor first of all, and again come back to the question. So I'm also with the Director Customs and Trade Facilitation, Emil Sinzumusi, who will probably also be chipping in to probably shed some more light on some of the things that we are doing. Basically, the Northern Corridor was established in 1985 under the treaty known as the Northern Corridor Transit and Transport Agreement. It is a multimodal trade route that encompasses roads, rail, pipeline, and inland waterways. So it serves 6 member states.
Emmanuel, you are muted. Please unmute yourself. Emmanuel, we can't hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I was actually appreciating what East African Business Council to have organized this platform for us to share some of the things we are doing to make sure that we remain competitive. And I was actually saying that I'm standing in on behalf of the ES, who is Mr. Nyarandi Omai, who has not been able to make this call because of a previous commitment. And number 2, I was also saying that I am with Emil Sinzumusi, who is the Director Customs and Trade Facilitation, who will be chipping in to of course share some of the things and we are doing under trade and facilitation. So I was giving a brief background of the Northern Corridor. I was saying that it was established in 1985 under the treaty known as the Northern Corridor Transit and Transport Agreement, and it serves the member state of Burundi, DRC, Kenya, Rwanda, South Sudan, and Uganda. It encompasses road, rail, pipeline, and inland waterways. So the corridor also serves the North Tanzania and Somalia and Ethiopia. For those who don't know about the Northern Corridor, I was saying that it has two policy organs, one the Council of Ministers and the Executive Committee, which is made by permanent secretaries and the equivalents in the member state who are actually concerned or responsible with the transportation matters. So the Secretariat of the Northern Corridor is the coordinating authority with 4 specialized committees, one on customs, another one on transport, infrastructure, and private sector. It also has a framework for public-private partnership to actively engage with the public and the private sector. So now coming on the issue of COVID and how the corridor is performing in terms of making sure that we come back from where we were after this pandemic. It's true that we have quite a number of indicators that we monitor to make sure that we oversee the performance of the corridor. Our indicators actually we monitor around 40 indicators across the corridor, which are basically grouped into 7 indicators. We track transit time and delays along the corridor. We look at the productivity and efficiency. We also monitor the rates, the transport rates, and then we look at the volumes and the capacity in terms of cargo and port throughput. We also look at intra-regional trade and emissions indicators. Now, coming to the question you asked, it's true that after the pandemic and even during the pandemic, the transport and the supply chain in general has been affected by the pandemic. But of course, the corridor has been trying, together with other stakeholders, has been trying to put in place some of the measures to make sure that it remains competitive, since it was actually declared as one of the essential services that we are clear to continue during the pandemic. So to put this into perspective, there was this disruption of, there was the restriction of movement of people, number one, which actually disrupted the economic ecosystems and which actually generates trade. And number two, there was restrictions on travel movements, and this has also affected the transportation of goods across the corridor. Now, when you look at what the corridor did during that time, with the corridor in conjunction, of course, with other stakeholders, we tried to come up with some of the interventions that really helped the cargo to continue moving smoothly from one country to another. And before I probably talk about those interventions, I will highlight some of the key issues that really were observed during that time. One being the long border crossing time, which actually was caused by unharmonized or lack of the harmony in terms of responses, strategies that countries were putting in place to contain the spread of COVID-19. Number two was, in fact, the delays that truck drivers experienced, especially as they were queuing for testing and even acquisition of COVID-19 certificates. So this was also an issue, especially at the border points. There was also a spike in infection cases, which increased among truck drivers, especially at the border crossing points. Other challenges included, of course, the price, the global price. There were issues with infrastructure and so on. So now to mention a few of the few things that Corridor has been able to put in place to be able to deal with the situation. One is the development of and implementation of the regional electronic cargo and the driver tracking system. This has helped a lot because with this tool, the corridor and together with the stakeholders has been able to actually at least make sure that there is a mutual recognition of COVID-19 test results. That's number one. And number two, there was also issuance of digital certificate for cross-border movement. And the tool also provide a cross-border grade coordination framework for the Ministry of Health and other partners The tool also enabled, of course, verification of transit document and travel authorization. So number two, there were also these continuous meetings, monthly bilateral, multilateral meetings to make sure that all the issues that are emerging are taken into considerations and proposals are implemented. And again, we continuously looked at how we can enhance automation in terms of approvals, clearance, and inspection of and payments transactions. We also looked at how we can ease COVID-19 restriction measures. So basically, those are some of the things that we are doing, and we are continuously doing, and which actually helped during the pandemic. Now, the question of how the corridor now is performing as of today, when you look at the perspective, we probably not have time to probably give us a brief presentation on some of the key indicators that we monitor on a daily basis. But generally, when you look at the cargo throughput at the port of Mombasa, you'll find that the cargo is decreasing. And number two, when you look at the transit time, again, we see that the transit time is recovering generally to the from the COVID time to the normal. And when we see now the transport rates and charges across the corridor, we are seeing an increase in terms of transport cost, which is a bad sign for the performance of the corridor. And then the infrastructure-wise, since overall the bigger percentage of our cargo uses roads, when you look at the road infrastructure, we also see that the quality of road infrastructure is not good. We can not say that the infrastructure of today is good, because only 41% averagely is in a good condition. And then when you look at some other indicators such as customs delays after customs release, we're also seeing changes. And Chair, I think moderator, I think that is what I can say for now. Unless you probably
thank you, Emmanuel.
Apologies for taking too long, but I was trying to put it into perspective, and thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Emmanuel, for those insightful highlights on how the corridor is performing. I have a question, then maybe you'll respond to that just in 2 minutes. One that, of course, you mentioned about the challenges caused by COVID, and I was looking at the competitiveness of the corridors, and I realized that the northern corridor is not among the best corridors. So I wanted to hear from you quickly, because I looked at corridors that are performing well. There is what they call North-South corridor, which is served by Durban Port. Despite the volume and others, they are still more efficient than Northern corridor. So what are you doing to ensure that you catch up in terms of efficiency, in terms of the time, cost, and the reliability? Of course, I'll come to Dr. Marian Cebunya, who is one of your consumer of the services, to appreciate what you are talking about in terms of the improvement, both time, cost, as well as reliability, how you fast track the trade. So maybe you may respond to that. What are you doing to catch up in terms of efficiency?
Thank you very much, moderator. We as a corridor, we of course we are not among the best performing ports, like you saw the corridor, as you have mentioned, but we are not also among the I would say among the bad performance as per the ranking. Obviously, we are having quite a number of issues that are probably hindering our performance as a corridor. Like I mentioned, we have issue with poor infrastructure, and of course, this is very critical, because at the end of the day, we need to move cargo from one point from the origin to final destinations. For this one, we are trying to engage member states who are to make sure that the riding quality of these roads is maintained, because this is very serious issues that is affecting a seamless flow of goods. Number two, we have we are trying to make sure that we automate some of the things that we are doing. And of course interconnectivity of some of the things, because you'll find that in terms of transactions, and even how we receive this information, data sharing among ourselves, so that we are able to generate reports and guide our policymakers and other stakeholders. So you'll find that we continuously doing this manually. What Corridor has been doing now, we have upgraded the online tool that we use to monitor the corridor, whereby a new module has been added, which is the application programming interface, from which we will be able to share information, data from between ourselves and the data providers, so that we are able to report on daily basis, and even be able to capture some of the issues that are happening. So recently, we have also launched the Northern Corridor Strategic Plan, whereby the 5-year strategic plan, whereby we are envisaging to come up with an application whereby we will be able to monitor issues that are happening on the roads, and be able to put in place a mechanism of responding to those issues, so that the stakeholders will be able to see and know when the issue has been raised and what has been done. And this will be something that will really help our stakeholders. We also have issues of high transport costs and delays, and this is also really hindering us from being ranked among the best performing corridors, because the cost of transportation is still very high. And for this, we are encouraging and the use of SGR, of standard gauge railroad, to try to cut down on the cost of transportation, but of course trying to work with the stakeholders and see how we can deal with the issues of last mile connectivity. And also there's an issue with the regional electronic cargo tracking system, whereby we're also trying to work with the revenue authorities to make sure that they increase the number of these sales, so that there's we reduce these delays. And then we are also having issues with unimplemented trade facilitation instruments, whereby you find a truck driver who is probably entering one territory from another, and then he's requested to pay visas and other charges and the fees, which should not be the case. So we are advocating that this member state also domesticate some of these trade facilitation instruments, so that we reduce on the cost of transport, because all these charges are adding up to the cost of transport. So those are basically some of the issues we are looking at. Also these NTBs that are continuously emerging, and then we're also trying to work with our partners to see how we can deal with this. So, moderator, I think that's what I can say for now.
Thank you very much, Manuel. The last question to you, of course, you'll come back to it. Your uptake in terms of the e-commerce uptake. How is the corridor being positioned? As I mentioned, I looked at the report, and you are not selected among the smart corridors. So they said you don't have the prerequisite. They selected Durban to be among the pilot smart corridor under CFTA. Northern corridor are not meeting the requirements. So I was looking at what are you doing to improve in terms of the system automation. You mentioned what you are doing, but in concrete terms, just 1 minute, what are you doing to ensure that now you catch up in terms of automating the corridor?
Thank you very much, moderator. It's true that e-commerce is good in terms of easing transactions and even adding on reducing on the cost of trade. But still, like you have said, as a corridor, even if we enhance this this e-commerce in terms of all these things we are talking about, approvals, clearances, and so on, the cargo will still need to move along the corridor from one point to another. So part of what we are continuing doing, we of course continuing making sure that we harmonize whatever we are doing in the countries in terms of trade facilitation instrument that we are putting in place. In terms of automation, like I have mentioned, we are making sure that we strengthen some of the things that already exist and trying to make sure that everybody is on board. In the Northern Corridor member state, you'll find that though we implement the single cargo, the single customs territory, you'll find that not all the members are already on board. So we are trying to make sure that all the members are on board and they fulfill the requirements so that we are able to have all of them on board. So basically, we are trying to make sure that whatever we enhance automation of almost all the things we are doing. So, Chair, if you allow,
thank you. I'll come back to you. Thank you. I'll come back to you, Emmanuel. Thanks. Good work again. Yeah, and I want to appreciate what the Northern Corridor you are doing, of course, despite the challenges. Now, allow me to come to ask our the chairperson of National Logistics Platform, Dr. Marian Cebunya. You are most welcome, Doctor, and I know you've been you've been providing wisdom in terms of the corridor performance, how they can enhance their performance and be competitive. Doctor, from a private sector perspective, what are the challenges that are faced by the industry player while using the Northern Corridor?
Thank you, Vicky, and good morning to you and everybody in attendance. Yes, indeed, I have been giving a lot of advice and wisdom and experience and to the corridors and to the governments. So the biggest challenge I see still, I appreciate the initiatives by all, EAC, Northern Corridor, Central Corridor, EABC. I thank you so much for being very, very active. And think we have all been trying, but I think we have all been trying not in a coordinated manner. And the biggest challenge I still see on this corridor, and even if it's the only one I talk about today, because the rest come with it or fall under it, is the lack of appreciation of the importance or even understanding and of the importance of transport and logistics to the economies of the region. Many people refer to it as transport and logistics, as the backbone of any economy. We have had one of us, a professor at a Ugandan actually, a professor at Harvard University, has written several books, one of them being Transport and Logistics, the Wheel of Commerce. And many others have been written. I don't know whether we read them or not. That's why I said that the biggest challenge is still the understanding and appreciation by policymakers of the importance of logistics and transport to the economies of the region. And what do I mean here is that transport and logistics impact on every sector of the economy of any country, and therefore renders it competitive or uncompetitive. And for many years, the cost of production, transport to the cost of production has ranged between 35 and 47 some countries in this region. I know and appreciate the trademark efforts to reduce this cost of transport to doing business. At one point, we brought it down, I think, to 27 was the lowest it could be. I don't know today what it is at, but the importance of transport and logistics must be appreciated by the public sector, by the policymakers, by implementation, by the people who implement the policies. And when we look at it like that, then when we start appreciating it, we will cover a lot of it. We are looking at infrastructure, the physical infrastructure. We are looking at maybe even the softwares. I've heard Northern Corridor talk about the cargo and driver tracking systems. They are not yet smart. They are still like the Northern Corridor. They are not yet very smart, but those are all initiatives. But still, if we don't go back to deliberately appreciating the impact of transport and logistics to every sector of the economy, then we can't make it competitive. We can't make our region competitive as we go to the continental free trade area. That's number one. Number two, the policymakers' collaboration with the private sector is, I will not go into the academic and the what and the what. I will go to the common sense things that policies, before we go to the physical infrastructure, I will go to those that are low-hanging fruits, like they say. If we implement them, we can bring we can put the competitiveness higher or bring the cost of doing business lower. The collaboration of the private sector and the public sector, or the policy makers and the policy users or consumers, that's very, very key also. There have been efforts at the public-private dialogue that we started. It's there, but when we were introducing it, we also talked about formal collaboration with the public sector, because there we will do research together. We will discuss how best to implement the policies, because most times policies are made without involvement of the private sector, and when it comes to implementation, the private sector will not consume it, and then your efforts will have gone to nil. So that would be my second biggest challenge I see, because the rest are, they come up, we solve them, they come back, we solve them, they come back, the NTBs and things like that. I will not go into NTBs because the NTBs, we agreed that if we go according to the customs union or the common market protocol, where there is an article saying at the commencement, we shall remove all the NTBs and start afresh. And how do you start afresh is, if a country feels they need to introduce, nobody stops them. They notify the other partner states and introduce whatever restriction they want, which to us is most of the time a non-tariff barrier. So those ones are not going to, because we chose not to do it this way. The one I've just said, we chose to remain with all of the NTBs and keep complaining and removing one, and then come back, complain about another and remove it, and then as you remove this one, the other one returns. That's a shabby way of doing it, but I would mix my recommendations as well. I would recommend that EABC pursues this to remove all the NTBs and introduce one by one as need arises, because we committed. So it's the public-private dialogue that's not formalized and that's not working as should be. And then what I would like us to appreciate today is that one. Or if need be, EABC maybe will do a study, but the private sector has done studies to show the importance of transport and logistics and to every sector of the economy. And we have shared in Uganda with our government to appreciate and make deliberate efforts all the time to monitor the costs of transport and ensure they do not go high, to try all the time to be bringing them down, because they impact on every sector of the businesses we do. The other one is, we know it, of course, the challenge is the imbalance of trade. We import a lot, we export little. So this also, because the turnaround of say containers is when they return empty, you pay high. If they were returning full from the region or from partner states, the cost of transport would also go down. So we have to make deliberate efforts to find out what each country can export to the next country or abroad, but to balance the trade. So in Uganda, we have started the import substitution. They've introduced that policy, import substitution. We are trying to stop some imports that can be done in Uganda and consumed in Uganda or exported. We are trying to export. So we have to see the challenges. Of course, the third challenge I would say would be the high cost of transport in the region due to all the infrastructure. Of course, the physical infrastructure, Northern Corridor has talked about it. I'm talking about the trade imbalance and also lack of multimodal transport in the region. We all know that if there is, we depend heavily on road transport, but there are waterways, there is rail, there is air, there is we have to have a mixture of transport modes, which we call multimodal transport, so that you are able, like they've talked about the Northern Corridor, maybe SGR up to Naivasha, then continue with the other meter gauge, or even when they get to Kisumu, which we should be doing, is now you go north and go to Port Bell, Jinja for Uganda, for example. So lack of multimodal transport, trade imbalances are the other two. And the I wouldn't want to go into the operations because those ones are the
Thank you, Doctor. Maybe I'll come back to you on that, on the operational side, during the question session. But I picked really your brain, your wisdom in terms of using multimodal, not relying on road, use other means like rail, waterways. How do we use diversify our transport and logistics? Maybe that's the question I will be bring back to you and giving in terms of policy and regulatory and regulators in terms of what are the options. How can we diversify? How do we diversify our corridor rather than relying on road transport? Maybe on the question to you, and you even mentioned about it, Doctor. How do you see positioning our corridor to benefit from continental free trade area? Let me also come to you that there has been an appreciation, Doctor, that now transport and logistics is it's not just a wheel, but is a lubricant for trade. So at the continental level, it has been given the right seat and the right importance. So I wanted to see how do we position, what is your view about positioning our corridor to help us benefit from the continental free trade area?
Thank you, Idi. I think I briefly touched on that. We must make our corridor competitive. We must be deliberate about bringing the transport costs down, because so far they are the ones that are, because for us as freight forwarders, actually, when I saw the question, it was about freight forwarders or us, the transport and logistics people. It does not matter to us much, but because the competitiveness is about a country, for us, any cost that's added on us, on our transport, we add it to the clients or consumers of our services. And in turn, if it's a factory or what, they also add it in, and it ends up being getting to the consumer, the end user, getting there very expensively. So if you are importing, we don't talk about importing sugar anymore, but let's say if you are importing sugar and instead of a transporter making five or four trips a month between Mombasa and Uganda, and instead of, because of the NTBs, because of the uncompetitive physical infrastructure, we do 2 in a month, then we will have to put our transport costs, because our projections are based on 4 trips a month. So if I do only 2, I will add transport, I will add the cost to the costs will go high for transport. So if instead of the Ugandans consuming 4 containers a month, consume 2, what you see the effect, what drives the cost of transport high. So in order to be competitive, to these corridors to be competitive or competitively used to get to other corridors or economic blocks, we have to be deliberate. We have to be very deliberate about it and ensure smooth flow of goods and services, or goods mainly, to be competitive. Me, that would be my only recommendation, is to watch. I'm glad the Northern Corridor is monitoring the performance of the corridors, but if you can go beyond that and look at the hurdles. What are the hurdles? Most of them will not be costly or physical infrastructure. There will be just changing policy. That's all. So we have to make as private sector, we can, if we work with our government, we will advise on the policies that can change without any risk to revenue loss, which is what they look for. And by the way, here I wish to say that transport and logistics have become the easiest target for governments to hit their revenue targets, collection targets. So they keep loading on the transport and logistics. And in the process of loading, for example, if you look at the levies, the Northern Corridor levy, the Infrastructure Development levy, then I don't know what levy, then in Uganda, the VAT on international trade, then, you know, it's easy, and they know the imports will keep coming, so they will make the money anyway. But they forget that they are slowing down and reducing on the turnaround or turnover for the country to make the taxes. So I think we have to look deliberately at the corridor performance and the soft issues that we can handle, like policies or the low-hanging fruits, work on them now as we work on the infrastructure, like physical infrastructure, like waterways and rail services. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Yeah, I take a note of arbitrary policies, regulations. It's not an issue of infrastructure, but the government policies and regulations that are very ad hoc impacts on the logistics and transport competitiveness. So, as the EABC, we take that forward. We take that call, and want to appreciate you, Doctor, for that deep insight on what can be done, especially on the policy and regulation that impede transport and the logistics competitiveness. Allow me now to come to the Central Corridor. Engineer, again, the Central Corridor plays an important role in transport, trade facilitation. Of recent, I've seen a number of improvements along the corridor, and they are even coming up in terms of diversifying some of the products in terms of building and expanding the port, and also introducing new innovative instruments and tools. As I mentioned, that our corridor were not selected among the smart corridor under the CFTA, so I want to see to bring that challenge to the Central Corridor in terms of what are you doing in terms of increasing the traffic, in terms of improving efficiency, in terms of harmonizing the procedures, trade-related procedures. Doctor mentioned about charges, different charges that are being applied. So, Engineer, please, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, moderator. Yeah, a brief introduction of the Central Corridor. As you know, the Central Corridor is a multimodal transport network which connect the Dar es Salaam port to the member states of Burundi, Rwanda, DRC, Uganda, and also Tanzania. The agreement establishing the corridor was established in 2006, and we started operating in 2010 after ratifying the agreement establishing the corridor. Coming to your question, it's true. In the Central Corridor, we are trying to look at the infrastructure development to increase the volume of traffic through infrastructure development, logistics enhancement, And some of some of those measures are we do first of all we market and conduct awareness with our customers with a view to encourage the increasing of the utilization of the corridor and to enhance international and domestic traffic along the corridor. We also support planning and operations of the member states through proactive data collection, processing, and dissemination of reports that can act as evidence-based and to the decision makers. We do support integrated infrastructure network development through stakeholders engagement and resource mobilization. And also we do support logistics enhancement, business and competitiveness for example, rehabilitation of wagons for the to increase the railway capacity. Also, to provide capacity building for maritime and railway sectors, as well as capacity building for the clearing forwarding industry. Other measures we are doing is we do organization of private and public dialogue through stakeholders consultative committee meetings, which is an organ of the corridor comprising public and the private sector. Also, I need to mention that in our board of directors members, it's a private and a public sector. One from each member state has 2 board members, one from private sector and the one from public sector. Yeah,
Engineer,
brief, yeah.
Engineer, just quickly, thanks for explaining the policy organ and how you are constituted. But briefly, tell us what are you doing to reduce the transport cost as the central corridor? What are you doing? What measures are you putting in place to ensure that cargo at the port, cargo at the inland is expedited, is moving quickly? When we talk about corridor, we are talking about time, cost, and efficiency or reliability. What are you doing with the 3 indicators? Just briefly, what have you done?
Yeah, briefly, what we have done, first of all, we undertake monitoring of the performance of the corridors to know exactly where is the problem. And with this the dialogue that I was talking about, the issue are discussed and then taken to the organs that can take measures. For instance, we have advocated for the reducing of the number of way bridges where the trucks are weighing the cargo from 9 to 3. Now transit cargo are weighing on 3 way bridges, mandatory way bridges. We also advocated for reducing for harmonization of road charge users, and now it has come from 16 USD per 10 kilometer per 100 kilometer. Now it harmonized to 10 USD per 100 kilometer. We also, through the Transport Observatory, we are developing a cross-border track to monitor the cross-border time, so that we can reduce time. You can't to reduce the cost. The first thing to do is to reduce the time, removing those NTBs. It is helping to reduce the time and then to reduce cost. Also, the introduction of the electronic cargo tracking system, whereby the trucks now are moving through. Comparing that, the trucks were obliged to stop to customs checkpoint. Now they no checkpoint. Also, with the introduction of one-stop border post, whereby the trucks now are stopping at one border. All those measures has helped to reduce the cost of transport.
Thank you very much, Engineer. Yeah, I think that's a commendable effort, Engineer, and I want to really appreciate the corridor in terms of harmonizing and reducing road charges. It has been one of the SONE area. I'm happy that now all the countries now these charges, the road user charges, have been harmonized, and I think it is harmonized even across the northern corridor. Very good initiative in terms of cross-border charter. I think we have also, as EABC, we've been pushing for that. I'm happy that that is something you've worked on, and will continue to work on that across all the borders, because there are issues, and as Doctor mentioned, NTBs keep changing the form and the face. So we need to have this cross-border performance charter, how our borders are performing. Electronic cargo tracking, a good initiative, but I realize that I've been in a number of the borders, Horohoro, Taveta, and some of the areas are not geofenced. So I'm not sure that how you are implementing this, because some of the areas you cannot monitor them. And that was one of the challenge raised, some of the corridors, border posts. As I said, Horohoro, Taveta, they raised that issue that this electronic cargo tracking system, you are not able to, it's not reaching to some of the borders. That is something I'll bring back to you, maybe to respond. So allow me, in the interest of time, invite Mr. Gayo Ogambi, and the Shippers Council of Eastern Africa, they have done quite a commendable work. They have done a kind of the corridor performance assessment, looking at the indicators, as I mentioned, time, efficiency, cost, and some of the measures, some of the costs that were occasioned by the COVID. So allow me to invite Gayo to shed more light on what has been done and what can be done to improve the performance of our two corridors. Having heard the presenters from Northern Corridor, Central Corridor, and also Doctor who mentioned about issues related to policy and the regulatory framework. So over to you, Gayo.
Thank you very much, moderator. We are humbled to be part of this discussion. I'm holding brief for my CEO, Mr. Gilbert Langat, who unfortunately was not able to join. So I just want to start by commending EABC for convening this webinar. I also want to appreciate the contribution by Doctor in respect to the cost and the importance of logistics. I think those are very important facts to present in this kind of forum. For very long, we hear about manufacturing sector, agriculture sector, but we often do not hear about the importance of logistics and transport. And during the pandemic, it came to fore that without the transport and logistics sector, then the other sectors would not be performing. Before proceeding, just allow me to say that the Shippers Council is a membership-based organization formed by leading associations to intervene, and they represent the interests of cargo owners on areas logistics and transport. And since 2012, we have been undertaking the logistics performance survey which looks at cost, complexity, and time of logistic performance amongst the government agencies. We augment and support the other initiative by other agencies that also look into performances of the corridor, like the revenue authorities. And unlike the World Bank study that looks at infrastructure, ease of doing business, quality of logistics, and timelines, and the tracking, we pride ourselves in looking at the cost, complexity, and time it takes to move goods from one region to another region. The Shippers Council is also the chair of the Mombasa Port and Northern Corridor Charter. And the essence of this is just to appreciate and intervene on issues affecting logistics. Just to give some statistics, at the advent of the pandemic, the Mombasa Port throughput declined by about 0.9% from 34.4 million tons in 2019 to about 34.1 million tons in 2020. In respect to containerized cargo, there's also a 4% decline from 1.4 million to about 1.35 million. The region is slightly a bit expensive when you look at the cost of transport per kilometer per container. We are doing an average of about $1.8 per kilometer per container against best practices of $1 per kilometer per container. That just goes to support the sentiment of the previous speakers that we are still slightly expensive and we need to intervene by appreciating what are the cost drivers and putting in measures that can help us reduce them. I was happy to listen to Dr. Cebunya when she talked about revenue and trade facilitation. I think the biggest challenge we have as a region is how to balance trade facilitation vis-a-vis revenue collection. I know the region is dependent on revenue from import duties and import-related activities, but there's need for the regional government to appreciate that to the extent that transport and logistics continue to go high, then even our competitiveness will be reduced. The last example I'd like to give is in respect to the production cost, where, as also alluded by Daktari, our cost of logistics contributes to between 35 and 42% to the production cost, against best practice of 8% in the Asian countries. So that makes us as a very uncompetitive region. So why do we undertake the study? We undertake the study to inform our advocacy work and to also to appreciate whether we are making improvements or not. We have realized that in respect to port dwell time, we are still high, and that's an area that requires some intervention. The transit time during the pandemic went overboard to between 5 to 8 days against best days of 3 days when there was no pandemic. So the pandemic really unraveled some of the underbellies in the sector that requires joint effort in terms of how do we address issues related to pandemic or any emergencies in the region. I think that's a key issue that we need to look into as we go forward. The other issue that came out very clearly from our studies is that in terms of automation, we are still very far behind. I liked your question about the e-commerce. Except for the government agencies, the private sector seems to be lagging behind. And we realize this even in the advent of reforms that were initiated during the pandemic that called for online submission of documents. The private sector had challenges, and it's something that the private sector needs to adapt into. Somehow, some of the good incidents, so to speak, were in terms of the revenue authorities adapting more easily than the other agencies. In the case of Kenya, we saw Kenya Revenue Authority adapting to less verification of containers from highs of about 80% to lows of 15%. And that went a long way to expedite cargo clearance. Our report also reveals that in respect to government agency intervention, a number of them went on board to incorporate ICT and non-physical interaction. So we saw that as an opportunity that we need to carry forward, even as we address the issue of logistics in the region. Border crossing remained a bigger challenge at the height of the pandemic, where we had up to about 70 kilometers trucks being held at the borders. And that also brings to fore the need for harmonization of interventions so that the region can speak and intervene in a coordinated mechanism. We saw instances where certificates were not being appreciated and charges also being charged differently. In the case of Kenya, it was for free, and in the case of Uganda, for cost recovery basis, they imposed a fee. So in a nutshell, we say that the region is still lagging behind in areas of automation, in areas of cost. And again, in respect to government agencies, we still see a number of roadblocks. Kenya and Uganda are still leading in that area. And there's need for harmonization of roadblocks. And one of the things that the private sector need to do is to advocate for a reduction in the numbers. For example, in the case of Kenya, at the point of start of journey to the exit area, and same for Uganda. Our study also reveals that in terms of choice of what port to use, the issue of cost is important, and the distance and the efficiency of the port. Our ports still are not efficient despite the expansions. And I think this is something that we need to interrogate, value for money and return on investment. How do you make use of the expansions in the port of Mombasa and the Salam? And how does that result to cost benefit in terms of the cost of logistics and transport? Finally, moderator, I think we also have to appreciate that the international dynamics, where during the height of the pandemic, the cost of freight charges more than doubled. And this also resulted to businesses paying more in terms of duties charged on CIF. Possible intervention would be for government policy to appreciate the dynamics of freight charges and possibly look at ways of reducing the customs duty which are pegged on cost of insurance and freight. In a nutshell, that's what I'd like to present at the moment, and I look forward to possibly responding to some of your specific questions, moderator. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Gayo. You've really elaborated and echoed to what Dr. raised in terms of the cost drivers, lack of competitiveness, lack of efficiency, the issue of value for money. And again, I hope Trademark team are also on the call, because when you invest, they have invested heavily in these border posts and ports, but there is always an inefficiency, and we always wonder, it's not about, as Doctor mentioned, it's not about the issue of infrastructure. And as where I see it myself, I've been moving across the region. I've realized the issue is not infrastructure, and the issue is not system. The issue is the mindset of our people to facilitate trade. So we need to look at work heavily, EAC and our national focal point. How do we coordinate our interventions? Lack of coordination. I am happy with your report. Again, the cost drivers are very high because this affects our competitiveness. 35 to 42% cost of production vis-a-vis 80% for Asia. We cannot be competitive. As I recall, Dr. Marian mentioned that we cannot be competitive. As we move into CFTA, we need to first look within ourselves. And in my opening remarks, I mentioned that, and there were very open and transparent indicators to assess our ports, and our ports were nowhere. Both Central Corridor, the Dar Port, and Mombasa, because of the inefficiency you've ably highlighted. So there's a lot we need to do. I see a number of hands. Maybe I can take some few hands, but I still have a question to you, which I wanted to reflect on in terms of your rich experience and what role of the private sector can play in ensuring the efficiency and effective delivery of transport and logistics. During your analysis, I read your report very well, a well-written report. Again, looking at those indicators, including complexity, reliability, cost, and the time. But what is the role of the private sector, the shippers? What can the shippers do better to engage in those policy setting, policy formulation, and even bring to the attention of the? I know you some of your board or governance structure are the ministers of trade. Do you bring these issues to them? What can we do as EABC in terms of engaging, in terms of raising these issues? Over to you, Gayo, before I open up the floor for comments.
Thank you very much, moderator. I think the private sector has a key role to play in ensuring that the environment is responsive. Number one, you need to have a unified voice in terms of appreciating the challenges and then articulating the impact, not only in terms of time, but a reflection of the cost. For example, it doesn't mean much, and with respect to governments, when you say it took us 7 hours, but when you're able to tie these 7 hours to cost implication, for example, when the trucks are stuck at the border for 5-7 days, what's the cost implication per truck and per the whole number of trucks at the border? That brings into fore the crisis in terms of the cost implication to the economy and the cost implication to the shippers. And number two, we need to work towards harmonization of policies and also to review the policies vis-a-vis the intended purposes. For example, today we are members of the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement. We need to appreciate what are the provisions in the article and bring it forward to the government. For example, we have just concluded a study on fees and charges, Article 6 of the WTO. And what has come out clearly from our study is government agencies are not even considerate that the fees and charges that they present or invoice shippers should be commensurate to the services being provided. Often the fees and charges are for raising revenue for the administrative cost. But the question, the Article 6 is that the fees and charges must be commensurate to the services provided. Number three, we need to monitor and give feedbacks to our respective associations so that they can also be able to present the same to government. As a council, we are involved in having structured discourse with the revenue authorities, with the ports. Only a day, on Tuesday, we had a meeting with the Kenya Ports Authority to present some of the challenges that the shippers are incurring because of the delays. Today, it's easy to know the estimated container arrival time at the port, but you're not certain when it's going to arrive at your destination. The local transport is unpredictable and unreliable. So through this discourse with the government agency, we're able to present. Again, we must be in the budget preparations and budget reviews in terms of articulating our issues and presenting impact analysis of our findings. For example, at the end of this webinar, it will be prudent that we present issues to the relevant agencies and then see to it that they are implemented. We as a private sector also need to plan our imports, to enhance our compliance levels, because often some of the delays are occasioned by non-compliance. And allow me to state that we are working with the GIZ to appreciate the compliance levels and see whether there are inherent challenges in the policies or there is inherent challenges in the private sector, so that we are able to provide interventions that may mitigate the challenges. So yes, the private sector has a role in terms of advocating for better business environment, and we need to have a unified voice, as I said earlier. So we look into working with EABC just to see what are the regional issues that we need to articulate, what are the border crossing issues. And I'd like your question about the African Continental Free Trade Area. Unless we are able to improve our border crossing time, we are able to improve our infrastructure and remove the NTBs, then we don't see us benefiting more from that, because the transit corridors, the challenges on border crossing, the harmonization of policies still remain a challenge. I submit, moderator.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Agayo. Very good, very eloquent, articulate on the issues. And indeed, I've been also raising this issue. Border crossing time has increased, the transit corridor, the fees and the charges, which are not, which are arbitrary and harmonized. So I think complying to the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement, which we subscribe to. So those are some of the areas that maybe we need to look into as EABC, as our the Shippers Council, as Logistics and Freight Forwarders Association. We need to work together to have a unified voice. I take a note of that. I see as Nathan had raised a hand. Nathan, do you want to? Do you have any quick question? Because we are still
Thank you so much.
Still have, okay.
Thank you so much, CEO. My question goes to the Emmanuel from Northern Corridor, and it gave us a good snapshot of very good initiatives being done at the corridor, which seem to be more of monitoring in nature. We wanted to hear other initiatives, particularly those making the corridor more of an economic corridor. Economic corridor in a sense that there might be some initiatives on linking the economic operators, linking the trade hubs, so that we really understand or we appreciate efforts to move forward as economic corridors, not as monitors. And he never gave us a summary of NTBs identified and removed along the Northern Corridor. As my brother, my brother Marian from Central Corridor did it very well. That summary of what has been done in terms of NTBs elimination, in terms of harmonization of road user charges. We wish that Emmanuel from Northern Corridor can do the same as Marian. Thank you, CEO.
Spot on, Nathan. Those are good questions. I will maybe before I allow Emmanuel, I don't know whether John Mathenge was able to join. John, have you joined?
Yes, I have joined.
Yeah. So let's before Emmanuel responds to the question raised by Nathan, allow me to invite John. John has been also very active in terms of the corridor, in terms of improving logistics services. Recently, John is heading an interesting company called Via Services, all aim to reduce trade, transport, and logistics costs, which I don't think everyone mentioned. Doctor mentioned, and Mr. Guy mentioned we cannot be competitive under CFTA if our cost of logistics transport are still very high. Again, if they add 40% of our production, then we should not think about the CFTA. We need to see how we lower the costs. So over to you, John. Maybe I may pose some few questions, then you may respond to the question. One is that from a private sector perspective, and as an active player in the sector, what are the key challenges being faced by the transport and the logistics players across the region?
Thank you.
Over to you, John.
Thank you, moderator, and hi to all on the platform on the meeting. It's really a pleasure to have this meeting and to have this conversation with colleagues in the industry. I take note of the many friends and colleagues and partners on this platform. In terms of introduction, and first of all, apologies for joining in late. I was rushing in from another meeting. But in terms of introduction, as the moderator said, I am a team leader for a company called Via Service. We are providing container guarantee services This is a Swiss-based company that has set its footprint in East Africa. It works around the issue of providing transport logistics across the globe. So in this region, we identified container deposit as a major challenge that was affecting trade and transport facilitation, and we came to provide a financial service in form of container guarantee so that shippers, freight forwarders do not have them to put up container deposit. Having said that, Chair, you asked me about the what is my perspective, and maybe I will try and not go into the specific operational issues. I reckon my boss, my president, Dr. Marian, and Agayo and a few others did quite a good job elaborating on the challenges that we have in this region. And again, I also want to say this. I am lucky to have been in this sector for now 26 years. And until very recently, 3 years ago, I came in the private sector. So that means I was in the associations and leadership on all those things, trying to deal with the issues we are talking about today. The reason why I don't want to talk too much about the operational issues, but focus on what I think, in my view, are the overarching challenges that we have as a region that is preventing us from moving forward. Number one, I think this region does not know where to want to go with logistics. If you ask any one of us, where do we want to work, do we want to find our transport and logistics sector 10 years from now, five years from now? That's a very big challenge. And this is why we very much are always talking about the Northern Corridor competing with the Central Corridor, Kenya, Uganda competing with each other, Tanzania. And that argument doesn't help anyone. So we need to be very clear, where do we want to take our logistics sector? Just speaking from what Mr. Ogabi presented, he was comparing the cost of transporting goods in our region and in Asia. And the difference was so much. And that can almost explain to you why we are net importer from Asia. We are not exporting anything, because just that cost difference alone is enough to make our business uncompetitive. So we really need to think about where do we want to position our logistics sector in terms of competitiveness, in terms of value addition. Now, the other big problem is that we do not have what I would call a regional or a holistic approach to transport and logistics sector. We have tended most of the time to have this silo mentality. Now, silo mentality, it is between governments, between the private sector players. When you come to Kenya, they are talking about ourselves. They are thinking and doing things for Kenya, Uganda. You go to Rwanda, all the countries are doing things for themselves. Although publicly we talk about doing things together, but when you see our behavior, when you see how we implement the issues to do with non-tariff barriers management, infrastructure development, all of them do not point to an integrated regional approach to that. And this is why, for instance, we don't, you have things, you keep talking about the same things, borders that are not operational, and it doesn't help. And this also goes to the private sector. Just to give a bad example, I'll call it bad. I am now involved in the containers and what have you. Every time there is a problem with the transport system, therefore maybe the time taken to return the container to the shipping line is taking a little bit longer, we in the clearing and forwarding sector and the transporters want to go to the shipping line and ask them to increase the number of free days. We see that as a solution. But the bottom line is the shipping lines are part of the logistics sector. When you're talking about competitiveness, if you are going to keep someone's container for 40 days, trust you me, you're going to pay for that cost, even if they give you the additional days. So what's happening is that eventually the shipping line will build their cost so that they can cover for that additional cost. And what we are ending up with, instead of enhancing our competitiveness by getting the additional days, we are actually increasing the cost of doing business. And this is how we need to see things. Because you find in some markets, incentives are, for instance, in this particular example I've given, to work around returning that container as quickly as possible so that you can reduce the cost of doing business. And therefore, in terms of where we want to go, because it's very critical that we must think regional, we must act regional, we must have a regional approach, we must have an integrated approach to logistics so that we are not seeing Port of Dar es Salaam, we are not seeing the Port of Mombasa, we are not seeing maybe the Northern Corridor, we are seeing ourselves as a region. And the more important is, for the shipper, it does not matter. For the consumer, it does not matter how many things are happening across. It only matters what is the eventual cost of the goods that reaches the market. And that is what matters to us. So we must be able to think in that direction, that are we pursuing a regional holistic approach that really helps us to reduce the cost of doing business, so that when you come to the border, actors at the borders are not going to think about themselves, they are going to think regional. When you think about the private sector, all of us are going to think about the same, because if we did that, our laws should be integrated, they should be speaking about that bigger goal that we want to achieve, so that then we can be able to bring the cost of doing business, the cost of logistics sector in this region much lower than it is today. Because if you don't do it like that, I can tell you for a fact, we will not never be able to break this uncompetitiveness cycle that we have at the moment. On that one, maybe I will just leave it at the two of them.
Thank you very much, John. And then you've covered the issue related to the silo mentality, the direction of trade, transport, and logistics. We need to define it, having a holistic approach in the regional and issues, both transport and logistics. Those are very pertinent issues. Let me ask you the joined question. What are the key recovery measures or interventions that you could propose the regulators and policymakers to ensure that, again, transport and logistics, which were heavily affected by COVID, could recover quickly and be competitive?
Thank you, moderator. And again, maybe when I speak about recovery, we can talk about the low-hanging fruits. Of course, in the long term, we are more interested in the long-term sustainable, interventions that will eventually push us to the next level. What I'm saying about this is that COVID just made us to see the challenges that we have. But I think beyond the COVID, the challenges that we have in the logistics sector are still the same. They haven't changed. Nothing that has changed a lot. If you ask me, things are back to normal. A lot of things are just taking back the shape that they were in before. And I think for me, the way I would look at it is, what lessons can we learn from the challenges that we had? So that challenge then becomes like a learning opportunity for us to come in with interventions that are going to address the challenges that we have been having for a very long time. Now, Dr. Marian talked about issues of multimodal transport. And I want to push that recommendation a little bit further. There's something that we call integrated logistics. Right now, there is proliferation of standard gauge railway developments in the region. And we need to look at transport as a solution. You need to look at the port as part of the transport system, as part of the border system, as part of the warehouse, so that we have a system that works. When you have these developments being invested largely by the public sector, but they do not connect, or they are not integrated with what the private sector is doing, we are shooting ourselves in the arms. And on one hand, we pronounce ourselves that we are doing very well in terms of sorting out our problems, but we are creating other problems. So we need really that integrated approach, where if it is the transport, if you are doing a port, somebody can think beyond the port infrastructure. You are thinking about the systems that interconnects with the port. You need to think about the warehouse. You need about the entire system, ecosystem of that logistics chain, so that someone does not just see the port. Sometimes you see vessels lying at the port for maybe 20, 30 days. That's a cost to us. So we really need to focus on integrated logistics. The other bit that we really need to think about is and maybe again for the long term, is we really need to think about developing a regional policy framework. I don't know whether you want to call it a transport logistics policy for this region. And we must agree as a region, as governments, as private sector, where do we want to be, and when, and who is supposed to do what, and how are we going to hold ourselves accountable. Number 3, here, my submission is that we need to see transport logistics not as an aid in itself, but as an enabler of business. So our focus should not be about making too much money from the transport and logistics in terms of levies, regulations, charges. You are passing through a country, you pay so much, but about pushing our production capacity to cost less, so that we can increase the amount of production, the amount of competitiveness, so that we can then be able to increase trade in this region. Because the challenge we have now is that things can't happen. And even when they happen, even when we are saying that, you know, the numbers that we keep presenting to ourselves, we are saying that this corridor is doing better than this one. But then at the end of the day, we are just talking between ourselves. So when you compare with the people out there, we are no longer, we are not anywhere near being competitive. So I think it is important, first of all, to work around that issue. Look at enhancing competitiveness, what you call creating competitive advantage of the transport logistics sector. We need to ask ourselves hard questions. What can we do so that our logistics sector can be competitive, can be able to compete with the best? The moment you unlock that question, then we are going to push numbers and we are going to push trade. And the other recommendation that I have is what we talk about value creation. We can leverage a lot on technology, like the service that we are providing. We provide the whole service through an ecosystem of technology. So we don't have to meet with our customers. They don't need to come to us, and everything is done on the system. We can see everything, and we are able to cut down on a lot of things. And I think even from our regulators' point of view, they need to invest more and to adapt the use of technology more, because it's less cumbersome and less manipulated, because the systems we have at the moment, everything is human driven to a very large extent. So you go to our borders, you want to have one revenue authority on the one side and the other one on the other side. Nowadays we call there's a one-stop border post, but it is the same argument. We are wasting too much time at those borders. If we can leverage technology, we can leverage risk management, and we can start focusing on logistics, not as a need in itself, but as a business enabler, so that then we can create the boost that we need for trade. I submit, Chair.
Yeah, thank you again, John. Thank you. Use of technology in our corridors, in our border post. I think that is the way to go. How do we ensure that we reduce the human interaction, and that's how we can be able to expedite and facilitate trade. So I have a number of questions raised. There's a question raised by Nathan to Emmanuel, but there are others on the call. I had Eric. Eric has raised his hand, but there are also other questions on the chat box. Maybe let me first those on the call. I give them opportunity to raise their question. Then I will also read those at the chat box. In the meantime, Emmanuel, could you respond to the question raised by Nathan?
Thank you very much, moderator, and much appreciation to Gashaija, my actually friend, for the good questions. And I would also, first of all, like to commend my fellow panelists for their submissions, especially Dr. Marian, when she talked about lack of a multimodal transportation system to see how we can deal with this issue of high transportation costs. She also mentioned issues to do with lack of policy harmonization, which continuously actually hinder our performance as a corridor. On the question of corridor playing much a role in terms of monitoring and not really focusing on aspect of economic development corridor, that is very true. In the past, we've been really focusing on making sure that we monitor the corridor and we are able to identify bottlenecks and make recommendations and produce reports and indicate who is responsible to deal with all those recommendations implementation. And I will say that for the 2021 year that has ended, we really we have published the Northern Corridor Transport Observatory report, which has captured all the issues and proposed recommendation, and it is as I speak, it is available online on our official website. But now going back to the question of making sure that we implement or we make part of the implementation of interventions that make the corridor very economic instead of concentrating on the monitoring side is true. The Northern Corridor, first of all, I would like to assure all the stakeholders that the Secretariat of the Northern Corridor is very committed, is very much committed to make sure that we reduce the cost of transportation. And we know that when importers across the region are making choice or are selecting which corridor to use and obviously the mode of transportation to use, they look at a number of indicators like the moderator has mentioned. There is transport cost, transport time, and transit time, and even the reliability, efficiency of the corridor. So we also looked at those few parameters among the list of other parameters that importers considered most of the time, and we were able to come up with some of the tangible issues, interventions that we can push forward and make sure that we reduce the cost of transportation. So number one, as a Secretariat of the Northern Corridor, we on the issue of multimodal transportation system, where we believe that this will help on reducing the cost of transportation. We undertook a baseline study across the whole Northern Corridor region, trying to understand the status of inland waterways in terms of policies and operations, what needs to be done, and why stakeholders are not using this mode of transportation, yet it is the cheapest mode to move bulk containers and cargo as compared to roads. And also trying to make sure that we avoid this over-dependence on the road. So the report is out, and we have quite a number of interventions that need to be done from the operation side and up to the policy and the regulation side. So we now can say that we know what needs to be done in all the member states and what needs to be done in terms of making sure that these water bodies that we have that are actually navigable complement the road infrastructure we have. For that, we are talking of transportation, for instance, of fuel product from the port of Mombasa to the member state. We know that of recent, there's 2 oil jetties that are being constructed. In fact, on the side of Kenya, the oil jetty in Kisumu has been completed, but on the Ugandan side, the Mahati oil jetty is almost completed, substantially completed, if I may say. So we believe this will be a game changer for the fuel transporters, because not only they will save on the cost of transportation, but also they will reduce on the risks of transporting this fuel product. What we are doing as the Northern Corridor, we are making sure that we put together with the stakeholders and we sensitize and we inform them, all the fuel tankers and business community that are dealing with petroleum product, that they use these 2 facilities along the Lake Victoria that can help them to reduce on the cost of transportation. So the Northern Corridor is leading this exercise, and we are planning to do more sensitization and make sure that whoever is importing this fuel product from countries like DRC, Rwanda, Burundi, can pick their fuel in Kampala instead of coming to Mombasa or even Kisumu, because this fuel will be transported from Kisumu to the side of to another side of Lake Victoria, which is in Kampala, through the barges that will collect this fuel product from Kenya. So we believe this is something that will change in terms of fuel cost, transportation cost, and even the ease of doing business. Number 2, we're also advocating for the use of SGR, which has Kenya has extended this line up to Naivasha as I speak, but you'll find that the cost of transporting cargo from Mombasa to the final destinations in the landlocked countries by using both modes, and when we compare the roads and this SGR up to Naivasha, we'll find that it is still high, and because of this issue of transshipment and so many other issues that we are working with the stakeholders to make sure that we deal with the last mile connectivity issues. So this is also something very important that we believe that as we continue engaging, we'll make sure that at least the cargo is taken from the port of Mombasa to Naivasha, and the stakeholders are now able to go and pick their cargo from Naivasha. Those are important from landlocked countries like Rwanda, Burundi, and DRC. We believe this also will reduce the cost of transportation. So apart from that, we are also looking at the infrastructure side and trying to assist this member state coming up with tools that will enable them appreciate the quality and the riding quality of infrastructure. We've done something in DRC and South Sudan, and we believe this also will help improve on the riding quality of road infrastructure, and of course would improve the seamless flow of cargo from one country to another. So those are some of the things that we believe are tangible that we are now working with member states to make sure that they improve on this. Also on the issue of policy harmonization, because you'll find at the end of the day, all these issues we are talking about, roadblocks and so many other NTBs along the corridor, are linked with unharmonized or lack of harmonized transit transport policies and regulations. We are also working with all the member states to make sure that whatever is being done in Kenya, in Uganda, in Rwanda, in Burundi, South Sudan, and DRC are harmonized. So now coming to the second question, where you, Gashaija, asked about the NTBs that we've been able to identify across the corridor, and even what we are doing to make sure that we reduce them, because of course we cannot remove them completely, like the moderator has mentioned. These things keeps emerging in different forms, but of course we are dealing with this on a daily basis. We have multi-stakeholders consultation meetings where we meet and discuss all these issues on quarterly basis. But basically, when you look at our reports, you'll find that these MTBs are in form of way bridges, where, for instance, in Uganda, you'll find they are still implementing the fixed way in motion. Whereas in Uganda, in Kenya, they are doing high-speed way in motion. So you understand this is something that is adding on the transit cost, because a truck has to stop to be weighed and then continues. Yet the policy is to make sure that we implement high-speed way in motion across the region. So basically, we are able to collect information from the roads using a mobile app, and we are able to know where all these NTBs issues are and the reasons behind. And we are able to report on this on a daily basis, because we collect this information. We know why these truck drivers are stopping and whether they are paying charges or not. So basically, these NTBs, if I can probably rank them, we have those that are related with the way bridges. We have roadblocks, of course, along the major roads network along the northern corridor. We have security issues and some extent hidden costs that also we need to investigate further and know exactly why are they being paid and what are the causes of those. We also have issues to do with processing time, especially at the port of Mombasa and even some of the nodes across the corridor. We have visa issues that are being paid in countries like South Sudan and DRC, which is also adding on the cost of transport. We also have some SGR users who are complaining about the rates they are paying, which is far different from what is gazetted. And this is also something that is very, very critical. We also have issues of high shipping line charges. I mean the deposit for containers at the port of Mombasa, which is also another issue that is really hindering the performance and the competitiveness of this port. So I'll say that these are issues that are being dealt with, and we have recommended whoever is responsible to do something so that these issues are reduced. So I will not say that we have reduced how many, as of today, we have reduced quite a specific number of roadblocks, but I will say that there are measures to deal with these roadblocks. And we continuously working with our stakeholders and to make sure that we deal with all these road users. We continuously also implementing the weighbridge policies, where we are advocating for harmonization of these policies to make sure that we implement all of us a high-speed way in motion, so that we reduce on the transit time. So I think that is what I can say for now. Nathan, and you can find more details in our published report. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Thanks for, again, I've got a number of questions again directed to you, Emmanuel, and I think the Northern Corridor still, I will give it to Emily also to respond, because the question Again, let's also to Emily, who has been working on customs related issues. I have a question from Honorable, my good friend Françoise Umukiza. She's a Yara MP. She said that I recently traveled through Maraba OSBP, but I was shocked by the huge number of cargoes and trucks that were queued obstructing the road for long hours. What are the strategies to make sure that such unnecessary delays never happen again? So I think Emmanuel, who is also from Central Corridor, I visited Maraba with him. He understands this issue and has been endemic. Maraba has been endemic in terms of delays, in terms of long truck queues. So what is the Northern Corridor doing in terms of ensuring that you ease congestion, you ease delays at the Maraba border post? Maybe Emmanuel, let Emily respond to that, because the issue I visited Malawi myself, the issues has been customs. We even conducted a study. 57% of the issues, the delays at the border is caused by customs, and that falls under Emily's docket. Customs has not been responsive to business. We have systems, but they are not working. One of the systems they raised is an ICMS system. So, and I had recommended during the visit that once the online system is not working, can we use even alternative, we use the manual system? So this has been ongoing, and we don't see a kind of a positive solution. Emily, please respond to that, and I will lay the other question from the chat box. Over to you, Emily. Emily, you had raised your hand to respond to that question, but if you are not, then Emmanuel, go ahead and respond to issue of Maraba.
Thank you, Chair. I think Emil is in a better position to probably respond to this issue.
But he's raising his hand, but he's not responding due to time. We have a time constraint, please. You respond to it.
All right. Thank you so much, moderator. It's true that we currently, most of the time, we undertook trade, transport, and logistics survey to try to understand how these border points are performing. Of recent, we conducted a logistic transport and logistics survey through the border of Malaba and Busia, and we witnessed how these two borders are overstretched. Emil,
yes, you please? Yes, Emmanuel, now they have unmuted me now.
Okay, that is correct. So you can probably continue and explain about what intervention we are doing in terms of making sure that the border of Malaba, which is overstretched, is becoming a bit operational. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good morning, everybody. I take this opportunity to thank the EABC for organizing this forum, which is an avenue for exchanging of ideas and experience on how things should change for the better in our region. A number of issues have been raised, and I will pick just from where Emmanuel was, especially to respond to queries just raised by the moderator and stakeholders. In a nutshell, it's about what are the initiatives that the Northern Corridor Secretariat has been carrying out to address all of those logistics and trade issues raised. I like the concept that Mr. Matenge has just mentioned about the silo mentality that really needs to be addressed. So far, when you look at the issues along our corridors, issues have to do with some member states taking measures without consulting others, or some member states improving on things and others are not picking up. So corridor institutions are there just to harmonize choice of policies, and that have to be cascaded down under the form of operations. So the Northern Corridor Secretariat has been carried out a number of initiatives. Like it has been said, for instance, our corridors, Central Corridor and the Northern Corridor, should not be viewed as competing corridors. So to that extent, there are some road links between the two corridors that are really not efficiently used. I would mention the corridor link between the Central Corridor and the Northern Corridor, running from Voi down to Singida through the borders of Holili Taveta. And the Northern Corridor Secretariat not having a jurisdiction over one of the EAC member states, that is Tanzania, an engagement has been started with the EAC Secretariat in Arusha, so that the issue of geofencing and other issues along that link can be addressed. So we have started the engagement, and talks are underway, and we are expecting the EAC to integrate the Northern Corridor Secretariat on their technical working groups, so that we continue contributing in addressing those issues that are of regional nature. Another issue that has been carrying out, that has been done, actually to take into account addressing the silo mentality, the Northern Corridor Secretariat has thought of carrying out comprehensive surveys within its region of jurisdiction, so that when addressing issues, they are addressed in a comprehensive manner. So a number of surveys have been done, especially to ensure that multimodal transport is improved. You know, with the advent of the SGR in the region, and with the persistence of use of MGR, there is a need of connecting them together, and again, also connecting them with the other modes of transport. So a comprehensive surveys have been done, from which now we are formulating policies so that we can coordinate member states in adopting policies that will, let's say, avert that silo mentality when developing trade and logistics policies along our corridor. So we have surveyed facilities around Lake Victoria in Kisumu and Uganda. My colleague has just mentioned oil jetties in Kisumu and Kauku in Uganda. And linking those facilities with the other modes of transport has been the concern for the Secretariat. So that has been done. So very soon we will submit, let's say, coordinated policy recommendations for addressing the same. Hello? Yeah, I'm attending a meeting much. I'm sorry for the interruption. And we have also been advocating for decongesting the borders of the traditional borders of Malaba and Busia. And a start of solution now is underway. Now the alternative crossing border of Ruahaha is being used for return of empty containers, empty trucks. Now work is being done now to have infrastructure, road infrastructure on both sides improved, especially on Kenya side, so that that direction, that route can also be developed and used for transit, especially for cargo going to Uganda and South Sudan. What else? I think, Chairperson, for now, I can stop there. Okay, let me add the safety aspect, because the safety of cargo and and the truck drivers of Paramount. The Northern Corridor has also been carrying out the mapping of black spots along the Northern Corridor. And the black spots, those places where accidents are happening the most, have been mapped. Now we are developing guidelines for managing the same, so that moving cargo along the corridor can be secure. The advocacy for development of roadside stations has also been ongoing, though there is some delay because it's a PPP engagement, it's a PPP project. So coordinating the public and private sectors have been a bit challenging, but it is a program that is still ongoing.
Yeah, thank you.
Finally, Chairperson, we've been mentioning imbalanced trade due to the region being a net importer. So to address that, the Northern Corridor Secretariat has been developing a business opportunity portal that has been launched last time by the policy organs. The platform will enable interested operators to see where businesses are in the region, so that at least if we can't carve down imports by exports, at least we can limit imports by regional, local produce.
Emil, through the moderator, could you please also mention something on the alternative transit routes we are proposing to make sure that we ease the existing Malaba and Busia, please?
Yes, yes,
Emmanuel. And another one, Emil.
Yes,
it's also the question raised by Nwagaba on the competitiveness. How do we ensure that corridors? And I remember Emmanuel mentioned that corridor, you are tracking intra-regional trade using corridors. So Nwagaba is asking how EAC competitiveness affect the commodity and the food supply chain for vulnerable people in the region, especially for the newest member, the DRC. How are you tracking that? How do you ensure that there is a positive spillover between what a corridor is doing in terms of the value chain? And I know you have that indicator, but it has been very redundant.
Yes, sir. Concerning the alternative routes, I've just mentioned Ruakaka as an alternative route to the one through Busia and Malaba. I can also mention a survey that has just been completed, whereby the route from Kitale to Nadapal, that is the route to South Sudan, can be improved. Very soon we have already issued out the report on the same. So very soon we'll start engaging authorities in South Sudan and Kenya, so that recommendations can be implemented. There is also a link that is likely to enable some of the Northern Corridor countries to use the port of Lamu through the city of Lodwar in Kenya, especially Uganda. So that is also an alternative route for maybe Uganda to be able to use the port of Lamu and finally decongest some routes of the Northern Corridor. Yes, that is what I can mention about that on alternative routes. Regarding the competitiveness, I have mentioned the opening up of alternative routes through Tanzania, running from the Northern Corridor. This is meant to optimize exchange of commodities within the region, so that at least by decongesting traditional borders, we are of the view that also will save on transit times and eventually on the cost of transport, which of course will enhance the competitiveness in the region. Finally, Chairperson, the implementation of the single customs territory that the Northern Corridor Secretariat has been supporting as a program under EAC is also one of the programs that are meant to increase competitiveness. Though for now, we have like a situation of variable geometry, whereby some countries have not been in position to implement fully the program, but it is a program that we are advocating for, especially for the member states of South Sudan and DRC, so that at least the cost of transit, especially in terms of reducing the number of boarding requirements and fresh declarations and the use of IT systems along the corridor, can enable the competitiveness of the region. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much, Emily, and thanks for highlighting those intervention tools to enhance competitiveness, the alternative routes that are being designed. Again, that is a very good insight and an addition to what Manuel said, and also responding to the question raised by Nathan. And we look forward to see this business opportunity proposal you are putting across in terms of the viability and sector that would draw or could close the gap or trade-related gap. So with that, allow me to again invite our panelists to give them 1 minute for one key recommendation that we need to take forward. Let me start with Dr. Marian. Having had all the discussant panelists, we want to pick from your wisdom the key recommendation we can carry forward as EABC, as the EAC, as we move forward to enhance our corridor performance and take an advantage of the continental free trade area. And again, allow me to again echo and appreciate the support by Trademark in the various areas that has been highlighted, and they are also keen to support our engagement in the CFTA agenda. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you, moderator, and thank you all who have spoken after me, especially in Northern Corridor. There are so many initiatives. The Central Corridor ones were clear and straight, but the Northern Corridor ones seem to be a lot. There is a lot, of course. I think the volumes are more on that side and the pressure is on you. So if I was to give one recommendation, like you have asked, I would recommend that we find a way of, first of all, the private sector speaking with one voice in order to be heard and not confuse the policymakers, but also to have structured formal relationship or engagement with governments or our partner state governments. And in that regard, I would talk about the composition of the board in Central Corridor and the composition of the board in the Northern Corridor. They are different. So in all we do, can we borrow best practice from each country in the policies, but through formal structured engagement with either EAC or the partner states, the private sector in the states, and the EABC with EAC at the regional level. I think that would be my biggest recommendation, because a lot of things, when government is talking to private sector, we are supposed to be, or the EAC is supposed to be people-centered and private sector-led. So how do we lead when we are not in formal relationships? So that's my one. If I was to make it one, that's the one thing.
Thank you, Doctor. May I suggest Emily, please mute yourself, Emily. Emily, would you mute yourself, please? So let me now with that, thanks, Doctor, in terms of the engagement, structured formal engagement between the corridors and the private sector and our authorities. That's something we are going to take forward through the EAC and through our technical working groups to see how we can resolve some of these issues that have been highlighted and presented. Issue of a coordinated approach in terms of and the competition among corridors other than complement. Agayo, please. One key recommendation that would have a positive impact on the corridors and the logistics at large.
Thank you, moderator. I also want to appreciate the panelists for very informative presentation. In a nutshell, I think we need to identify the key drivers of cost along the corridors with a view of providing requisite interventions. And this is the premise of the fact that we seem to be doing too much and the impact is not kind of being evidenced. So I think it's something that we need to look at. What are the key drivers of cost? What are the hanging areas that can be intervened immediately? What requires policy and regulatory changes? That to me, I think would be important. We also need to look at the efficiencies of our ports in terms of dwell time, turnaround time, and the overall impact on transit time and the corridor performances. And then lastly from me is the tax regime. The licensing, the permits are issues that we need to look into if you're going to make our corridor more efficient. I just want to agree that we should not focus more on competitive approach between the ports, but a complementary role where efficiency reigns. And that to me would be important. And we also need to depend on the monitoring that's being done by the Northern Corridor to provide interventions. The question my friend asked was important, but we can only improve what we are able to identify as constraints. So it's just important that we embed research work and interventions that go a long way to improve the performances. Thank you, and I submit.
Thank you very much, Gayo. Allow me also to invite John Mathenge.
Okay, thank you, moderator. Again, I also want to thank all for continuing to be on this platform. One quick one from my end is, again, to reiterate just what I said earlier, is we need a regional and integrated transport logistics system. And we need to be very clear where we are taking our transport logistics system, its competitiveness. We need to have a very clear vision where we want to be, so that everything else that we do is focused on delivering that vision that we have, but acting as a region, not as acting as countries, not acting as sectors, not acting as authorities, acting as one.
That's a very powerful message, John. Thank you very much. We take a note, breaking down the silos, work as a region, not as a single country, have integrated transport logistics systems. There's a lot of work to be done there. So I think that's finally, let me invite engineer from Central Corridor again for your key recommendation. Of course, as from EAB side, we need to engage further both the Central Corridor and Northern Corridor to ensure that the efficiency gains, the cost drivers, as Gayo mentioned, how do we reduce these key costs? So, engineer, please, any recommendation from our side?
Yeah, thank you, moderator. I think I agree with Mr. John Matenge. I think we need to think with our private sector, especially when it comes to exportation, to have an holistic approach. I think they can reduce the cost of export of goods. Another thing for the private sector is, of course, to engage in their member states, to engage the public sector, to improve some services. As I was saying, the issue we have now, it's where there is a best practice to use them. Every time we do things as usual, whereby there is best practice that we can borrow from the member states. I think our private sector should also look into these, bring the government to borrow best practice elsewhere. Maybe another recommendation for public sector, I think to improve the efficiency of railway sector. You know that the railways can have a very good intake. They can take a lot of cargo, and it's a green infrastructure, reduce gas emission of gas. I think also private and the public sector should work together to improve the railway transportation and also inland transportation. Thank you. That's my submission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now let me invite Emmanuel just for one or key recommendation from your closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much for actually organizing this platform. It is very, very important for us, and even a way of actually communicating what we are doing for the betterment of the corridor. So my first recommendation will be that East African Business Council to continue on creating this more platform for us to discuss and talk with our stakeholders and put on table whatever we are trying to come up with to make sure that we improve our corridor and we make it very competitive. It's true that this corridor, the Northern Corridor, handles almost 66% of the whole East African cargo. So we understand the pressure that is under this corridor, and we need this joint effort, this joint collaboration, so that we can be able to handle some of the issues that are continuously hindering the performance and competitiveness of this corridor. So I'll recommend or convey my recommendations in two perspectives. One, engaging, calling all the private sector to participate in a development of and operationalization of some of the interventions that we are trying to come up with. For instance, this operationalization and development of inland waterways transport services that we are talking about, which will ease and which will enable us shift as part of the cargo that we are handling on the road to other modes of transportation. This, we believe that this will reduce these congestions we are talking about at the crossing borders and even improve on the safety aspect of our corridor users. Number two, we're calling the private sector to be part of development and operationalization of way bridges that we are talking about along the corridor, because we believe that if the private sector is part of the implementation and operationalization of these facilities along the corridor, we will be much more efficient in terms of achieving our outputs. We're also calling them to participate in the development and operationalization of roadside stations, which is a priority project for the corridor, to make sure that that we improve on the safety of the drivers and even on the well-being of the corridor users in general. So we also continuously calling the private sector to continue pushing and be part of the implementation of the SGR implementation across the region, and because we believe this would cut down the cost of transportation. So, moderator, I would like to thank you so much for the East African Business Council for preparing this, and we believe you continue under your leadership, continue preparing this so that we have a platform to communicate and even reach out and tell the stakeholders what we are trying to do so that they be part of our intervention. I thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I will allow me to, on behalf of the board of EABC, to convey my deep appreciation to all the panelists for excellent presentation. And again, the issues you've raised are very pertinent, and we'll continue to take them forward. Also take the opportunity to appreciate our development partners, Trademark East Africa, for their continuous support in terms of technical support and the budget for us to have this dialogue. Again, we've had this engagement webinar, but we are going also to have more physical meetings where we're bringing policymakers, as Dr. Marian highlighted. We need to bring ministers, we need to bring PSs from our because some of the challenges highlighted through this webinar relates to our policy settings, our policy programs that are intended to look into revenue generation as opposed to trade facilitation. So we may need to organize a physical meeting, and I will make sure that all on call we've taken the record. We'll make sure we invite you and dialogue, and also appreciate what the corridors are doing. Again, as mentioned by Emmanuel and others, that they are good tools and instruments that both Central Corridor and Northern Corridor are developing, or they have developed, but they are not known to the users. They are not known to the private sector. So it is now up to the EABC to ensure that the usability of those instruments and tools. And again, I think Emily mentioned the issue of a single customs territory, but not only a single customs territory. We have authorized economic operators. We are talking about the port charter, and again the web number of web bridges, the one that have been introduced, that the way in emotions. There are a number of instruments that we can raise and sensitize the private sector to use and take. And I know some of the challenges really emanates from from low level of awareness and engagement. And I commit again through the board that I'm going to take this recommendation forward by engaging the policymaker, engage the EAC Secretariat to ensure that some of the areas highlighted are addressed. There was two issues that were highlighted, I think, by Emily, like the issue of geofencing. No one knows about it. I participated in the Council of the Minister, but there was a resistance because, again, of lack of understanding the benefit of geofencing our corridor and what does it mean? What does it mean? So we need again to break down those silos and do a cost, as Gayo mentioned, do a cost-benefit analysis of each modes or of each alternative routes we are planning and how it benefits the private sector. And really, I'm happy that these good initiatives have been brought forward. And I want to again congratulate and appreciate Shippers Council, East African Shippers Council, for doing that report, analyzing logistics performance index, using the three indicator: time, cost, and complexity. We can build on that in terms of understanding where the cost drivers emanates, either the ports, at the border post, and at the inland. So we'll take that up as EABC, again through our donor Trademark, to bring it to know where the issues lies in terms of the cost and the competitiveness. Otherwise, again, I want to thank everyone, thank our good participants for raising those pertinent questions. And again, we look forward to continue engaging with a view to improve business environment in the region. The issue of regional value chain will be very critical, and we are taking it up. I had a meeting this morning with the GIZ. They are keen to support us in terms of developing a regional value chain, pharmaceutical, vegetables, leather-related products, and the tourism sector. So that's where we're moving in terms of corridor. But before I close, I want to invite you for the next session, which will be commencing at 3. My team is going to share the link, and we are going to look at the common external tariff, the force band structure. What does it mean for the business community in the region? And that is one of the instruments, again, where we've been advocating for in terms of enhancing industrialization, value addition, and job creation by safeguarding our regionally produced products. So again, I want to thank everyone, thank the EAC partners, EAC Secretariat partners who are here, and again, convey the appreciation and the support by the SG. He was not able to join, he had traveled, but he has given the blessing for this engagement. Thank you very much, and wish you a bon appétit.
Merci pareillement.
Thank you, and bye-bye.
Thank you very much, sir.
Merci beaucoup. Asante sana.
Bon appétit à tout le monde.
Bon appétit à tout le monde.
Merci pareillement.
Thank you, Udi. Nice day.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Bon appétit.